Duit, agus fáilte. Hello and welcome. Big doing chuig na bunrudaí. Let's get back to basics. In the previous video, I showed the routing of the housings for the hinges, the hinge recesses I should say. And in this video you always have to be able to go back to basics from the point of view of using hand tools. So when I started out I would have been doing it by hand. Now without further ado, let's just get into the marking process for the hinge. Some people literally off the hinge up to it like so, and they just use a pencil to bring the line around, and they'll end up with a series of lines like that. So you'll have the width of the flange and you'll have the length of it obviously there. I don't particularly like that, simply because when the hinge goes into play, the hinge itself, I'll turn it on camera now, I'll just line it up first. When I do that, just to show an exaggerated form there, if I can do this for camera, when you do it that way, it shows an awful lot of knuckle there. That's the knuckle on the hinge. And I don't particularly like that, there's too much shown. So what I like to do is send the hinge in further towards the centre of the pin, but not to the centre. So when I'm doing that, I'll set up my gauge literally like that, my marking gauge, and I go to the pin. Should be able to pick that up on camera there. Maybe I'll step back from it. Should be able to see that. That's what I do. So that when we have the result that I'm talking about, we'll end up just showing, let me do this again, we'll end up showing less of the knuckle when we turn the hinge to camera. So you'll see that less of the hinge shows up. Get my fingers out of the way there. So less of the hinge shows up, an arrangement like that. So literally all I'm doing, if I go back to where my markings are, all I'm doing is I'm sending in the hinge flange further in onto the edge of the timber there like so. In order to do that, I have my marking gauge set up. I have everything ready, so I have two marking gauges, one for taking the depth of the flange or the width of the flange, and the second one then for the thickness of the actual leaf itself, the flange itself. So the hinge itself, the gap that's in between them there, that's the gap I want between the panels obviously. I don't want it more less than that, because I want a lovely fine line to end up with. So I'll take the thickness of the flange, just the thickness, that thickness, plus a smidgen, a couple of little hairs like that, and I'll sit it ever so slightly below the surface. So I've this gauge set and I've that gauge set. Now I'll come back to the basics of hand tools later on, and I think it's quite important to do the hand tool applications, the uses and the setup of them. I was very fortunate when I was young. I had a wonderful teacher back in 1975, which is 49 years ago, and the man is no longer with us, but he was a wonderful teacher, and his name was Jim Connolly. He was a local man, and the lessons he taught me good techniques, good practices, and I've never forgotten them. So when we come to the hinge, we'll just go back to the hinge. I'll deal with the hand tools later on. So those basics that I was shown nearly 50 years ago now, I still use them today. No matter what machine we use, we'll always come back to using hand finishing in fine cabinet making or in fine joinery, architectural joinery, whatever we like to call it. So without further ado, I just want to show some of the techniques that man Jim would have shown me all those years ago. He would have shown me about setting up the gauges and all that business, and the use of the chisels. So good habits, good practices, and good application of them. And once you learn them, you never go back again. You'll use them forever. So I still use them all these years later, and until the day I no longer exist. So when we come down to the hinging, a couple little processes there. You can see it on side view. You can use the hinge itself to mark the length, obviously. Now this is just a dummy piece for explanation purposes. Make sure your pencil is sharp. It's not a pencil now, it's a tool. Use a piece of, I normally use 240 paper there to get the edge on that there. The sharper, you want the hinge recesses to go in and the hinge to sit in flush and nice and neat, no gaps. You don't want gaps, it's ugly, you don't want that. You might as well, it's as easy to do it right as to do it incorrectly. So I'm ready to go. If the pencil like that, if that pencil on the back of the hand, that's a sensitive part of your hand, if it doesn't hurt, it isn't sharp. Job done. Shin a will, that is that, right? So I'm just going down here anywhere. and I'll put a line across here and I'll put a line across here. Mark the line just once, just as long as you can see it. I hardly see that on camera. If I have to bring it up very close there for you to see it, there you go. Now, I'm back to my first gauge. So when you're back to your gauge here, simple technique with the gauge. I come here in front of it. You gauge the bottom point, like so, and you come back to the first one, and you gauge down, and when you get down to the bottom, bang, it'll stop where you put the pin mark down the bottom there. Now Jim would have taught me that 50 years ago as well. It prevents the gauge from running on there and creating a dirty line that you can't get rid of. So you score only the amount you want. So you score the bottom of the hinge recess first. Anytime you're doing marking gauge work, that's what you do. That's the technique I would use. It's fail-safe, it's excellent, it's simple. So I have that gauge line like that, and if I go back to the earliest method I showed you there, you'll see that the hinge, the recess is further in than the actual flange when it's just turned off the knuckle there, faced off the knuckle. So it goes in nice and sweetly there, shows a small amount of knuckle on the edge when it's actually finished, and it looks beautiful, and that's what you want, aesthetically pleasing. So with the face done, we literally have that gauged, we just draw a line down there like so, that's it, and we go on to the edge. I use my square just to square the lines onto the edge, like so. Now I can use the hinge also. I can put the hinge this way, and I can just literally square the lines across also. So I can do it both ways, whatever you want. The hinge is probably better. So you get the hinge marks across onto the edge. Back to your second gauge. I just like my second gauge here. Pin the bottom of it, score it there, or point it, and then down you go there. So there you go with the second. That's the second one. So now you've got your width and you've got your depth. You're ready now to mortise, or not to mortise, to do the little housing, I should say. Now this is the hand method of showing what we did obviously on the router in the previous clip. If you haven't seen that, refer back to the previous clip. Now, my bench is a little bit, there's a tiny little bow there, and that's going to cause a little bit of vibration or shatter. So, well, I'm going to go, it doesn't matter. I've this done already here, have I? No, I haven't. Right, I'm going to go with the middle one. I'm just putting a piece of sandpaper under there, and I'm just going to clamp it here so I don't get any bounce on that. Now, I'm ready now to mortise, or not to mortise, it's the same thing. I'm ready to do the housing. Mortise is something that's in the centre. We'll do that at another time. Chisel, little bit of hygiene on chisel. What I mean by hygiene is to work cleanly and safely all the time. If you haven't got edge on a chisel, there's no point in going at work like this. You have to have edge. I'll deal with edge. It's a whole art in itself down the line as we go through the little videos, and I'll show my experience of almost 50 years in the trade and craft with in the area of sharpening, and I'm still learning. The more I profess to know, the more I realise how little I know. When you come to using a chisel, it's very seldom taught. So I'm going to do, I've taught, the best I can do is to try and simplify something. Is not how you do it, it's going to be how you don't do it first. And then if you say, don't do it this way, well then you're right onto the point of doing it the right way. What I mean by that is this. When you're doing recesses of any sort, mortising or anything like that, again, Jim Connolly would have taught me this all those years ago. You don't hold a chisel, you don't use a chisel. So this is what you don't do. You don't use a chisel like this or like that. That's all. You use it vertically. It's always used vertically when you're in a vertical plane. And a vertical plane is, think of a glass screen there. So I'm ready to do that. You don't hold, second thing, you don't hold a chisel on the top because you can't determine its centre of gravity. So what you do is you hold a chisel. Think of being on a bicycle, learning to cycle. That movement there. Once you're down low here on the chisel blade, you can determine the chisel centre of gravity, and that's exactly what you want. Now you may be able to see this when we go on camera. You won't cut your fingers by keeping the blade low like that. Now I was taught this, it's up to everybody to do it their own way, but Jim would have taught me this years ago. I still liked what he showed me and I've never changed. It's just good habit. So when you'll just give a little tap maybe to just demarcate the point you're starting with there. So I'm down there and I'm working centre of gravity. Then I just give it one tap, just one, and I'll move back. Now for the moment I'm going to take my hand out of the way there and put it up here just to show the action. The chip, the first time now I'm going to go down here. Once I hit the chisel with the first tap, I'm just going to demarcate it first. And once I tap the chisel is going to go in that direction. It's going to break the chip in front of it. And that's the action that a chisel is meant to perform. The bevel on the front will drive it back to the last recess there, the last indentation. So the chisel will actually go back. So I start from the centre and that chisel is coming forward. So I'll take it out, take my hand out of the way just for clarity. And the chisel has moved the chip there forward. So I'll take small little incremental chips. So I just tap like that and down we go. So the important thing here as we're going back along is you just demarcation, one tap. The reason for one tap is that each tap will drive the chisel down exactly the same depth, and that's what you want. There's no such thing as lash, lash, lash. Now when I was at school, there was a lot, we were eager and we'd be mad to do that, we'd be lashing it until you get the technique right. Jim would always be trying to tell us, no lads, don't do it that way. Always just give it a tap and then one stroke or two, but no more than two, and then move back, move back, move back. Start from the centre, he said, move towards yourself. And then from the other side, you turn the chisel around and you move back the other way. And that's just what I'm about to do. So, just to complete, there's no more to say, my hand remains low down there. And I'm just so used to this. My finger, my ring finger there, literally moves the chisel, it steps it. The chisel will actually step it. I'm just going to turn my finger there. When we hit it there, the finger moves and pushes it forward on the timber. So that's what I'm doing at all times. Now I'm not sure if that's clear for people to understand, but you'll see here, I have the chisel around the wrong way there now. So I'm just going to show, every time I hit that chisel, drives the chip forward. And that breaks the previous chip. And that's the action. That's when a chisel is at its happiest. Now you leave a tiny bit of line at the back there because you can't finish the line on a bevel. It must return around to a vertical surface there to take the hinge. So once we've halfway done, we run back the other way, and this time we can see the chips in front of us. They're going to come back towards me now. Every time I hit that, bang, that chip is broken, that chip is broken, that chip is broken, and we just step along the way there. Now you'd be surprised when you're doing multiples of these by hand, you'd be surprised how fast you become at these. Now we're spoiled in today's world because we have the routers, and they're a gift of course for doing multiples, but the odd time you might have to do just a single hinge for something that's broken, and you have to come back to it. So all you need is a sharp pencil, sharp chisel, two marking gauges. If you haven't got two, well, one will do you. Now, I'm not happy with the line there of the hinge. It looks to be a little bit off there, the flange, so I'm just going to check it there, and I'm going to square the line here just to make sure I'm hunky-dory. So I come across there, I go back close to the line there, very close to the line, and I'm just going to take that out there, and I'm just going to show you that's what I have there. And you'll see that all the cuts, you'll see that all the little indentations there, the single chop has broken each of those chips. So those chips, if I clamp that again now, and if I can keep out of my own way on camera, I leave the ends for the moment. Don't bother your backside with the ends for the moment. So I'll leave that there. Now I might need another clamp there, but the second action with the chisel is to hold the chisel like so, like so. You put the heel of your hand onto the edge there, you catch the chisel, and the action of the chisel going forward is going to be a sweep motion. You're going to sweep. You're using your hand as an arc. Your hand is brilliant. The human form is brilliantly designed for working with tools. So I'll just go back down here. I have the line. I just go back down here and I just push that across there. Now I can do it the other way as well, but unfortunately I'm going to get in the way of the camera. I would prefer to be here and holding the chisel like so underneath with my hand there. I'll try it just to show, but you see that these chips there is nothing holding those in position because they're already broken free of the timber. So I'm just going to use a little zigzag motion there. Now a sharp chisel is what you need. Now I'm using the inch chisel here. I'm just going to momentarily step up to the 1.25 inches. And I'm going to demarcate the back line there just with the chisel again. So for the back line there, I can give it a little tap. Some people say don't ever tap with the grain, but you can give it a little demarcation there just to break off any little surface that's there that's not coming by hand. But it's so simple, you normally do it just by hand there. So I'm just here again, and the sound of the chisel dictates how sharp it is when it's cut cleanly. Now I'm working with Popular here. It's a bit like pulpy paper, but it's good. It's alright. It's a lovely material to work with, simply because it has its qualities. It's soft. It's not free. It's easy to sand. Loves to sand here. It's easy to sand, and it takes a good polish, so it's easy for a painted finish. So that's the beauty of Popular. Now I'm just back here. I'll check my line there, and I'm just, without having to talk here, I'm just going to finish out the little nitty gritty here, little bits that have to come off. Now one of the things that separates, it's a question I'll address down the line again, the difference between trades and crafts. There's big distinctions, and yet there's parallels also. Talk about that later on. In craft, it's always finished by hand. Always, always, always. So I'll just go back to the line here now. I want to finalise what I'm doing. I'll go back to the line here. I'll stand over it here. I'll get it. I'll get vertical again. One chop. Take that guy out there. Take that guy out there. Just going to check the hinge there. I'm on the line. I'm looking good. I have a little bit of the line left, as a matter of fact. So I'll pop back to this guy here. I must. And take that guy there. So this is just the finishing on the ends, and that's the most important part. In order to get the lines, to get the hinge to line up perfectly without any gaps. You don't want gaps. Now the tiniest little thing there, when you have sharp chisels and you can stay vertical, you're always going to end up with good results. Well, there's an old saying, a poor tradesman always blames his tools, and age is vitally important. So I've that sitting in now sweetly there. Just clean off that there at the back. That's going to stay off camera. I know my back to the camera here, but I just clean that. And just take out. I'll come back this way on camera, and I'll just literally just draw on that there. Now that's my hinge. That's my hinge set in there. Remember, this is just an example for camera. I can be a little bit finer than this again, but just to show you that that's the hinge sitting in there, just below, just a little bit below flush. That's good. And when I just show, it's the edge I'm interested in. That when we come to the edge, in this case, we don't show too much of the knuckle here at this point here. So that's the action. It's just the actions of the chisel. Dealing with hardwoods, it's easier to work with them simply because you get a crisper finish on them. Poplar is a bit soft, but nonetheless, I'm not here to show absolute accuracy in what I'm doing. I'm here to highlight the technique. But that's a recess there, just below flush there. I'll still have the gap there that you'll see between, the gap that will be between the style and the other frame where my finger is there. So we'll have a tiny gap that you just see there where my fingernail is pointing to. Now, that's the hinging process by hand. Just to recap, you got to have the gauges one for the flange, one for the depth, or for the thickness, the depth of the flange. Marking the flange onto the timber with a sharp pencil, and then the action of a chisel that we use there from the centre back and from the centre back. From the centre back, from the centre back. The amount of taps, how we hold the chisel, vertical position, centre of gravity all the time, and then the cleaning process coming the opposite way for horizontal cut. I'll show them again on camera. I can show them many times because it does take a while to get used to them. There are certain ways of holding the chisel. So, agus anish go dí an céad ó slán go fóill. So until the next time we meet, bye for now. Over and out.